Hey, listen, I want to share a story with you all here with these next few songs, and it's an incredible story that a few years ago I read in a book called Through the Gates of Splendor. I first read about the story of Through the Gates of Splendor, the story of Nate Saint, Jim Elliot, the 5 missionaries who went to Ecuador in the 50s to try and reach a very savage tribe known as the Aucas. I was radically just transformed by the story, and it left its mark on my life. But I never imagined that I would get to share this story as I have on this tour with my friends, just like you, night after night. I started doing some research on the internet, and I came across a couple of articles written by Steve Saint. And I thought, is this the same Steve Saint that was 5 years old when his dad was killed and I read about in the book Through the Gates of Splendor? And we began to talk and email, and Steve told me about Minkai, and he said, you know, my children call this man grandfather. This is a dear man to our family. He's here with me right now in the United States. This is one of the 6 men who attacked and killed my dad, and I'd love for us to meet him, to meet you, and you to meet us. And I said, oh, that would be beyond my wildest dreams. You're gonna have to sort of imagine here with me for a minute that we're still at a concert, but this is something a little different. We're gonna kind of go on a journey together. If you're up for an adventure tonight, anybody here up for a little great adventure? All right, come on. We're going to the Amazon jungles of Ecuador. Here we go. Is God and I am not. I can only see a part of the picture he's painting. God is God and I am man, so I'll never understand it all, or only God is God. They had the highest homicide rate of any people group in history. They were reclusive, mysterious, as well as astonishingly violent. They had successfully warded off the government, the military, and progress itself, retreating deeper and deeper into the jungle with every outside contact. They lived as they had for centuries, walled in by the jungle. They were Stone Age people alive and well in the 20th century. Neighboring tribes referred to them simply as the savages. They were the Auca. They were young. They were smart. They had bright futures in many different fields. They were the movers and shakers of their time. They were adventurers. 5 men, passionate and obedient for the sake of the call of God. Nobody stood and applauded them, so they knew from the start this road would not lead to fame. All they really knew for sure was Jesus had called to them. He said, "Come follow me," and they came. with reckless abandon. They came and they answered, we will abandon it all for the sake of the call. No other reason at all but the sake of the call. Wholly devoted to live and to die for the sake of the call. The sake of the call.
They were brave, they were spirited, they were pushing the boundaries of traditional views. They were innovators and pioneers of their time. They were adventurers, 5 women, passionate, obedient for the sake of the call of God.
Wholly devoted to live and to die, not for the sake of a creed or a cause, not for a dream or a promise, but simply because it is Jesus who calls. And if we believe, we'll obey and we'll answer. Will you sing it with me? Oh, we will abandon it all for the sake of the call. No other reason at all but the sake of the call. Wholly devoted to live and to die for the sake of the call. For the sake of the call.
So the team of Operation Auca was born, and time was of the essence. The oil companies were weary of struggling with the indigenous peoples who stood in the way of their oil. The government was embarrassed because they couldn't control their citizens, and the tribe was in jeopardy at their own hands due to intertribal warfare. No matter who struck first, extinction seemed inevitable. So in the fall of 1955, just before the flood season began, the missionary team realized they had a window of time. They stepped through it.
We were dreamers, boys on the wild frontier, new believers, nothing in the world to fear. We had discovered the treasure of the love and the grace of God, and it burned like a fire in our heart, and we would throw back our heads and run with the passion through the fields of forgiveness and grace. We carry the eternal flame with an undying hope and a blazing conviction, and a truth that will never fade. We were glowing in the dark, children of the burning heart. Hey, yeah, hey, yeah. Children of the burning heart. Yeah, yeah.
They knew the risk, they knew the sacrifice, but they knew that somewhere, far removed from everything else, lived a group of people in darkness, people that had never been introduced to their Creator. No one had ever brought them the good news of God's love. They had to be told before it was too late. The missionary team felt this was the reason they were alive. They knew that others had gone before them unsuccessfully. It's no small thing to try and bridge the 20th century and the Stone Age, wrote Nate Saint. They knew they had a lot to lose. But he is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain that which he cannot lose. And so the day came, the moment they had fasted and prayed and hoped for. The overtures of friendship had been successful, and the missionaries made the first known peaceful contact between the feared Aucas and the outside world, complete with peanut butter sandwiches, insect repellent, and an airplane ride. Their moment had arrived.
Men of courage, with your message of peace, what is that look in your eyes? Why have you come to this faraway place? What is this story you would lay down your life to tell? What kind of love can this be? There is no greater love than this, and there is no greater gift that can ever be given than to be willing to die so another might live. And there is no greater love than this.
Imagine being 5 years old, a time when Daddy is your hero. How do you tell a child the most tragic news of his young life?
Broken hearted from all you have lost, how can you sing through your tears? What is this music that can bear such a cost? What is this fire that grows stronger against the wind? What kind of flame can this be? And there is no greater love than this, and there is no greater gift that can ever be given than to be willing to die so another might live. And there is no greater love than this. This is the law that God showed. is no greater love than this. There is no greater love.
What now? They were gone. But why? It seemed like such a waste. 5 young men, their whole lives ahead of them, their young families by their sides. Where was God when the spears went in? Where was God when the bodies were dumped in the river? Why? How? The questions flood, drowning all that you thought you knew. But this is not the end of the story. As is the case with God, sometimes what seems like a tragic end is really a miraculous beginning. One of the wives of the 5 martyrs and the sister of another were compelled to continue what was begun. Elizabeth Elliot and Rachel Saint had studied the Auca language with an Auca woman named Dayuma, who had escaped from the tribe during a killing raid and was now living in a nearby village. Then one day, in an unprecedented act, 3 Auca women emerged from the jungle. They came with an invitation to the women. Come live with us and tell us of the man-maker. Rachel, Elizabeth, and little Valerie Elliot took a step of faith and followed a trail never before walked by an outsider. One by one, the tribe responded to the good news. Little by little, the Bible was translated into their language. Rachel Saint lived out her entire life with the people she loved so dearly. At her funeral in 1994, the Waodani offered a second invitation for an outsider to live with them. A boy whose history was intertwined with theirs was asked to walk with them into the future. The original vision of Operation Auca 1956 came full circle as Nate Saint's son, Steve, uprooted his family and headed for the Amazon to join the Waodani as they followed God's trail. And now they are no longer the Auca, the savage. They call themselves simply the people, the Waodani.
My heart is restless as I wander through this jungle. The trees above refuse to let the sunlight through. And somewhere deep inside I hear the whispered longings that tell me I was made for more than this. A blinding flash of light falls down into the darkness. Slowly I notice strange new markings on the trail. The crimson drops are calling out to me, come and follow. I am the God who made you. Let me show you how to live. And I cry, I want to be a God follower. I want to go wherever He leads. I want to be a follower. I want to walk the trail He's marked for me. And when I reach God's place, I will look into His face. And then I'll look for you. Will I find you there? Can you say with me, I want to be a God follower. I want to be a God follower. I want to go wherever He leads. I want to be a God follower. I want to walk the trail He's marked for me. I want to be a God follower. I want to go wherever He leads. I want to be a God follower. I want to walk the trail He's marked for me. More than anything, I want to be a God follower. Does our God write some amazing stories or what? What an incredible story of the power of God's Word and of God's grace, the transforming power. night after night, I stand here just humbled by this whole experience, but there's probably not a part of the concert I enjoy or I'm more humbled by or more privileged to do than this moment right now when I get to introduce you to a man who's become a dear friend of mine and a man who I consider to be a mentor of mine in many ways. And it's a great privilege to get introduced to you, Mr. Steve Saint.
It was just over a month ago that I was watching television on the anniversary of September 11th. The program I was watching dealt with the terrible trauma that is being faced by young children who lost parents in that terrible tragedy. And you know, as I watched that program, I couldn't help but remember when I was a little boy, the night that my mom took me into her room to tell me that my dad had been killed and that he would never be able to come home and live with us again. And that could have been my tragedy, except that my mom was a woman of faith and went on to explain to me that she was sure that even this terrible thing that was happening to us was part of God's plan, and that she believed someday we would know that for sure. And since then, I've found out for myself that God never wastes a hurt if we'll let Him write His story with our lives. And today I know that both of those are true, because the very people who brutally killed my dad and Roger and Pete and Ed and Jim are like family to me. And one of those very men who speared my dad to death and then threw his body into the river to be eaten by the fish and turtles, just a couple years later when I went in to live with the people and my Aunt Rachel, that man made it clear to me that he wanted me to be like his own son. And when he would take his boys out into the jungles to teach them to hunt with a blowgun and to spear larger animals and to get fish in the river, he taught me the same thing so that I could go on living there with him and his people. And I've had the chance to take Steve and his boys and some of this great band and one of their sons down to the jungles with me to introduce them to my tribal family and especially to grandfather. And they've gotten to see for themselves what God can do to reconcile people to each other if we let Him write the story, and that He can transform any life that is willing to let Him. 2 years ago, grandfather and I were at our family home in Florida on our way to speak at a conference in Europe. And while we were there, my 20-year-old and only daughter came home. She'd been traveling around the country and around the world with a Christian singing group for a year. It seemed like it had been forever, and we were so excited that Stephanie was coming home. So we all got together and we went down to the Orlando International Airport to welcome her, and just so that she would know and to embarrass her a little bit, we made signs, "Welcome home, Steph." And grandfather can't read. So he took his sign, had it upside down, and was jumping up and down. He wanted Stephanie to know how happy he was that she was home. And then we went home, and we were having this wonderful welcome home party with our family and a few close friends. And during that party, I passed Stephanie in the hall. She was almost as tall as I was, and she put her long arms around me and gave me a hug and said, "Pop, I love you." And I'm telling you, just for an instant, I think I saw and felt what God must see and feel when His children love Him back. And then a few minutes later, Jenny came to me and she whispered, "Hey, come back with me to Steph's room." I thought it was a conspiracy to get Steph all to ourselves, and so we went back to her room, but it turned out that Stephanie had a headache and wanted me to pray. So as Jenny rocked Steph, I put my arms around both of them and prayed that God would take the pain away. And you know what? He did. But He didn't follow my script. And as Jenny rocked Stephanie and I prayed, she had a massive cerebral hemorrhage and died. I didn't know what was going on, so I called 911, and the ambulance came, and we rushed Stephanie down to the nearest hospital. And just a few minutes after we got there, grandfather came with our boys behind. And when he came into the emergency room, he was just desperate to protect his granddaughter from these people who had rushed into our home and dragged his granddaughter away. But when I told him that these things that they were doing, putting needles in her arm and a tube down her throat, weren't meant to harm her and that they hadn't caused this problem, then he grabbed me again, only there was a different expression on his face, and he almost looked excited, and he said, "Babe, Babe," using my tribal name. "Now I see this well. Don't you realize God himself is doing this, taking stars," he called Stephanie, "to live in his place." And then he called to the staff there in the emergency room. He said, "People, being a God follower, I'm going to die soon, and I too am going to God's place. And if you'll just follow God's trail like Stephanie and I have been, then when you come there, Nemo and I will be waiting to greet you in God's place." I have to tell you, it was a hard thing for me to get my faith around what grandfather was saying. And isn't it incredible that in the hour of my greatest agony, God used the very man who had killed my father to encourage me to go on believing that he did have a plan, and that even this excruciating hurt that I was feeling would somehow not be wasted as God continued to write his story in my life. And so would you welcome one of my dearest friends in the whole world and your brother in Christ, Meme, Grandfather Minkai. People ask grandfather and me two questions all the time. They want to know if it's really true that we love each other. If you want to know for sure, you have to come on the tour bus with us and see for yourself. But the other question that they ask us is how something like this can happen. A USA Today editor, when he was interviewing us, said, "You know, I can understand possibly forgiving the man who killed your father," but he said, "but loving him, that seems almost morbid." And you know, it would be if it wasn't true. But the answer to why and how something like this can happen is really very simple. It's God's grace and the power of his word. Now I'm going to ask grandfather to tell you in his own talk what God has done for him. And then I'm going to translate it into your talk as best as I can.
Botong ini ngirinda baba, wing ini namai. Akan ini yang mengapenikingan.
A long time ago, I wasn't a God follower. Nobody had ever come to teach me how.
Botong memeri, botong nyanyi ini namai yang mengapeniramai.
Even my parents and grandparents, the ancient ones too, nobody had ever come to teach them. How could we walk this trail?
Ini namai kenda bani ba. Kina ini namai kenda bani. We
hadn't seen the markings that mark this trail. So how could we find it? And then he said, "What are we going to do?" And then one day, two women came to live with us. One was Dayuma, who had fled from killings in the tribe. And the other one, he said, was Nemo, Star, my Aunt Rachel. Coming, they said, "Are you people living angry and hating like you used to? Haven't you seen God's markings?" And we said, "How could we see it?" And then they said to us, "People, if you keep walking your own trail, when you come to the end, what's going to happen to you? Where will you be?" And we had to say, coming to the end of our trail, they'll just put us in the hole in the ground and we'll be dead. Grandfather said, and then something that I didn't expect happened. I had been listening to this talk and I knew it was a good talk. But because my heart was so dark, I couldn't understand it. He said, but then the Creator, Wangungi, He sent Wangungi Onawaka, His Holy Spirit. Coming, He took a very strong blood that Jesus, His Son, dripped and dripped for me. And with that strong blood, He did what you foreigners do with soap. When your clothes are dirty and they have stains on them and you have to wash them, Wangungi Onawaka took Itota's blood, and with that very strong blood, He washed my heart until it was clean like the sky when it has no clouds in it.
Mengung yang ba boti mo puni mini mo wa puni pangga mini banga puni nama mini mo da ponama irani anga di pangi mini mo da amba.
If you go and speak God's carvings, there will be some people who will say, "Bah, I don't want to walk this trail." Well, you just keep walking, but you keep inviting others, because others are going to say yes, and they're going to come walking this trail with you.
Nano otu tangai mai botong kabo ba kinanto otu ta tiri kakai ameno mimina ameno arkangi ma apane dai nana ngai mai botong mini apane baba botong giri nai kan mai ko kai ke bingade tame mo ma ke bingade apane baba.
Grandfather says, I can't stay here in your place for very much longer. I have to go back to my place with all the trees and speak to my own people there. And maybe I'm not going to see you again. But if you're a God follower and here tonight, when we go to heaven, he said, then I'm going to be talking to you myself. I think he means without Baba interpreting for him.
No.
Grandfather says, are you foreigners understanding me? And then he said, if you're understanding me, then are you going to say, woo? That's how the Waurani in a group say yes. So, inyi minipa? Okay.
I want to ask Minkai to do one more thing before he and Steve leave stage. And this has been such a special thing for us to get to do night after night, to share with you, I believe, the closest thing to the music of heaven I can imagine, as Minkai sings in his language of our Redeemer's faithfulness, and I'll sing in our language of our Redeemer's faithfulness to us. As I look back on this road I've traveled, I see so many times He's carried me through. And if there's one thing that I've learned in my life, my Redeemer is faithful and true. My Redeemer is faithful and true. Everything He has said He will do. And every morning His mercies are new. My Redeemer is faithful.